This session of work deals with exam technique for management accounting. What I've done is I've taken an old test 1 question and I've actually given it to you here. This one was asked a few years ago for 4862. Okay. I think it's better to do a UNISA test 1 question just to determine whether you can actually do management accounting properly or not. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to actually do this question and then come back to this video after you've done the question. Please do a proper solution. We're going to mark it properly. You'll be able to see whether you actually answer management accounting question, discussion questions properly or not. I'm now going to push pause on the video. Okay. Now that you've attempted it, let's go through the question. So discussion part A, it says discuss the issues listed below that should be considered. So income stream consistency, interest rate type, funding structure, and upon the financing of the new investment. You may assume the project will yield a positive NPV and acceptable IRR. Now it's asking you to discuss the issues, not list, but discuss. Okay? So income stream consistency, let's see what the question says. It says, Expand South Africa Limited requires 5.5 billion for the new investment project in the manufacturing sector in the USA. It is anticipated that this project will generate stable income streams for 10 years with income mostly denominated in US dollars. So what does the question say? It says that it expects stable income streams for the next 10 years. Now guys, if you simply wrote down you expect stable income streams for the next 10 years, that is just listing something from the question. You are not applying anything. The required says discuss, so you need to discuss this. So guys, if you're going to get stable income streams, are you going to be happy or sad? You're probably going to be happy. So because you're happy, you're going to say, I'm glad that I'm getting stable income streams. Therefore, there's less risk attached to this project itself. And you're going to need to do something like that. So looking at the solution, guys, income stream consistency. The income stream is expected to be stable over the next 10 years, thereby posing less risk. That's proper discussion. Now, if you did not discuss it and just listed the point, there's a problem with your exam technique. And let's move on to the next part. The next part says interest rate type, and it's for 2 marks now. So what's going to happen, guys? It carries on with the question. Based on the current funding status below, management recommends that a long-term loan be used for funding. So we're going to use a long-term loan to fund this. The majority of economists hold the view that economies worldwide will remain stable for the next 2 years, whereafter interest rates will drop. So we're asked to discuss interest rate type here. Okay? So what does the question say? We've got to start off with listing the fact. What is the listing the fact? The interest rates are expected to drop in 2 years' time. Okay, so that's the fact. You don't get a mark for that. But we need to apply this now. So if you expect it to drop, what interest rate type would you like? Fixed or variable rate? And it would be more positive to be on a variable rate, because if the interest rate drops, you will pay less interest. So looking at the solution, guys, again, since the interest rate is expected to drop after 2 years, look where the marks are. It's more beneficial to incur a variable interest rate loan. Okay, guys, it's 2 marks. We now need to do something. So what are they asking for? They're asking you to discuss this. So guys, what can you do to mitigate your interest rate type, guys? You can always enter into some form of hedging arrangement. And generally, whenever you're asked to discuss interest rates, one of the stock standard things that you can always put down into a solution is you can say hedge it with an interest rate swap or something along those lines. You get 2 types of hedges, guys. If you charge interest to your debtors, if the interest rates go up or down, your debtors will act as a natural hedge to any South African loan that you have. Because if your debtors don't pay, you'll collect more interest from your debtors, and you'll pay more interest on your bank loan. So there's a little bit of hedging there against interest rate risk, if that makes sense to you. Or If you don't have interest on your debtors, what you can do is you can do an interest rate swap. Looking at the solution, interest rate swap. Moving on. Next one. Asking you to discuss funding structure. So what do we know so far? It says that you're going to use a loan to fund this. Okay, it's a 5 billion rand project. It's already said that. And they've given you a balance sheet, and it's got equity 10, long-term debt 6. So if you do fund this, what's going to happen? You're going to have an extra 5,000 debt, and we're going to end up with 11,000 for your debt. So they're asking you for funding structure, how are you going to fund this? And what's your funding structure like? Now at this point, what you do know is that for weighted average cost of capital, there's a target capital structure that you've actually got. Now, this question does not discuss the target capital structure, so you can't say what you should do, but what you need to do is you need to actually discuss it in context of that. So first of all, guys, what I would do is I'd say, listen, I've got 10,000 equity, 6,000 debt, so my current debt equity ratio is 0.6 to 1. That's not my current one. After I take this out, what is it going to be? It's going to be 1.1 as to 1. Okay? And that's what's going to happen. So remember, we're applying what we've actually got here. It's going to be 1.1 as to 1. Okay? So let's go through this qualitatively from a discussion perspective. From a risk perspective, more debt means more financial risk. So you're going to need to put that down in a solution. You're also going to need to discuss the fact that normally there's a target debt equity ratio, and that's actually done as part of your WACC calculation. We've got target structure. You're going to have to just ask whether the putting everything into debt takes you closer or further away from your target capital structure. Also with the 5,000 for debt, what can you comment about that? Debt is cheaper than interest. The debt is cheaper than equity because interest is tax deductible and dividends are not tax deductible. So you should put something like that down. Looking at the solution, guys. First thing, current debt structure 0.6 is to 1. 1 mark for it. Should additional funding via debt, be acquired via debt, it goes to 1.1 is to 1. Okay, increases financial risk. Debt is cheaper due to tax deduction on interest. Consideration to be given to the target funding structure, the industry norm, what's in the industry itself. Now here's the thing, guys. I need you to understand something. If you wrote down any relevant point that is not on this mark plan, tough for you. Within a management accounting exam paper, there's a fixed mark plan. Every single student needs to be treated the same. So you need consistency amongst markers. If something is not on a mark plan, you cannot get a mark for it, even if it happens to be a relevant point. Because every single student needs to be treated in the same way. So please just understand that what will traditionally happen is that they will take a test batch of papers, normally selection of who they know are the good students and who they know are the weaker students. And what would end up happening is that they would go through this test batch, call it 25 or 50 papers. They will mark in accordance with that mark plan. If they find points on there that they've forgotten to put into their solutions, they will add them onto the mark plan itself, because a lot of students have chosen to do that. They will also modify how the marks are earned, because they'll see whether people did well or did badly on the question. And if everybody does badly, the chances are that the mark plan will be a little bit easier. If people do well, the mark plan will remain as it is. But if it's not in the mark plan, you cannot get a mark for it. Okay? The second thing, if they ask you to discuss, you discuss. Don't just list a point. You need to explain what the implication is. So if they ask you to discuss, you need to calculate. So when they say discuss, it means calculate and discuss. So you'll see with the funding structure stuff that we've just did, there's 2 marks there for calculations. And then when you discuss, you can't just list a point. You've got to apply that point itself. There's more financial risk. Okay? We need to look at the target capital structure within the question itself. Okay? Debt is cheaper than interest, than dividends. Therefore, It's cheaper to actually finance this by debt, not by equity. Those are all application points. They're not facts that you're actually listing from the question. So it's very important that you know how to do this. Moving on to the next part of the question, it says, list the risks related to this investment. Now, again, guys, I need you to understand something. Okay? Your solution comes from the paper. Okay? You cannot sit there and actually suck things out of your thumb. I'd like you to actually just understand something. When a mark plan is set, first they will look to pull everything out of the question first. And then what will happen is they might put some extra points on later. So guys, with a limited mark plan, and if it's not on the mark plan, you don't get a mark. Should you be sucking out of your thumb or should you be using the question first? Obviously, you should be using the question first. So what I would suggest is, in the risk notes, you will see that as part of the risk notes themselves, I've given a listed all of the risks. I would learn all of the types of risks, just in case I ask it from you, because risks are a very, very common topic itself. But first, you've got to find risks inside the paper itself. So let's actually go through the different types of risks that you might find. So let's read again. It says, Expand SA Limited requires 5 billion for a new investment project. There's project risk attached onto that, because we've got a risk of a new product itself. Okay, it's anticipated will generate stable income streams for the next 10 years in the USA. So there is Forex risk. Okay, mostly denominated in US dollars. Based on the current funding status, I recommend a long-term loan to be used. There is interest rate risk built into the question itself, because it's okay in the US as well. There is country risk attached onto it. Okay, because it's a loan, there's not just interest rate risk. You're going to have a worse debt equity ratio. There's going to be financing risk. Okay, because it says the long-term loan be used for funding. Okay, and guys, we're after interest rates will drop. The current rand-dollar exchange rate, if you hadn't picked it up, there's forex risk over there. And the rand is weakened by 5% against the dollar due to interest rate differentials amongst others. Okay. The other thing, guys, that you might just have to do is, because it's a project, there's the risk that the project might have to be closed down or discontinued. Just look to see what's happening with the coronavirus at this point in time. Now, guys, it's out of 4. I've listed 6 risks down there. So do you need to actually go and suck something out of your thumb? No, you don't. And again, look, guys, there's the different types of risks. There's 6 of them. They all come out of the question. You need to use a question. Have a look at part A. Did everything come out of the question? Everything came out of the question. So one of the most important things with Mac and with auditing, I need you to actually just think about it, is that it's not important to get a right point down. It's important to get a right point down that's on the mark plan. So where you're most likely to get reward, you've got to use the question first, and then if there's not enough in the question, then you've got to suck it out of your thumb. So you need to actually go through this. So please use the question first. Now, bearing that in mind, let's look at part C for this question. It says, advice in which currency should the loan be denominated? Provide justifications for your advice. So it can either be in dollars or it could be in rands. So what should you have done? Now, obviously, guys, if you get the wrong denomination, okay, you're going to get 0 for the question. So you need to spend a little bit of time just analyzing why you would want to use US dollars versus rands or rands versus dollars. So first things first, let's just have a look at the facts of the question. So the project is in the United States. The income streams are going to be in dollars. Okay. And we need to get a loan. So should the loan be in US dollars or rands? So number one, guys, let's just actually look at it pragmatically. Where are all of the cash flows? They're in dollars. So if you're going to be repaying back the loan, should you repay it back in dollars or in rands? Second of all, guys, as far as this is concerned, where is the project located? It's located in the US. Now, think about going to a US bank to get the loan and think about going to a South African bank. If you go to a US bank, you see just down the road, we actually are building a new plant. The person, it's tangible. They know what's going to happen. They know what's happening in the local economy. If you decide to put it in Fargo, North Dakota, they'll know that it's minus 35 degrees in winter and it's going to impact upon you. Whereas if you go to a South African bank, there's so many uncertainties because they have absolutely no idea about what's going to happen to their business and the location of their business and all of the risks around it. So do you think it would be easier for you to get a loan from a US bank, or do you think it would be easier to get it from a South African bank? And guys, the answer should be quite apparent. So you should be actually saying the loan should be in US dollars. And what are the reasons? Let's look at what's in the question, number one. Okay, it says income streams in dollars. So that should be one of the things. Okay, therefore, okay, because it's in dollars, I'm going to be paying interest and capital back. So what's going to happen? I can pay back my interest and capital in dollars. I can pay it back directly from the actual project itself. Okay. Second thing, guys. Okay. The question also says that US interest rates are stronger than, okay, are lower than rand interest rates. That's because inflation's low. So if the interest rate is much lower in the US, maybe you want to actually use a much lower interest rate in the US. Okay. Third thing, guys, we discussed with the bank. Okay. The local bank knows what it needs. So it'll be much easier to negotiate with a US bank than with a South African bank because the US bank will know what security it's needed and what it needs to actually secure that loan. However, the one problem is the question does say that in the next few years, it's expected that the rand will weaken against the dollar. You need to put that into your solution because you need to say, just understand, if you take out a US loan, the rand will weaken against the dollar. You can take risk with it. You can do interest rate swaps and stuff like that, but that's not really what they're asking. They're asking you, should you take it in rand terms or dollar terms? Let's look at the solution. It says the loan should be in US dollars, 1 mark, because interest rates in the US are lower than that in South Africa. It's in the question. Revenue will be earned in US dollars. It's in the question. Note how all these points are. Therefore, matching and catchers. That is practical application. Security easier to obtain in US dollars. Much easier. And should the rand weaken, interest and capital payments will be more expensive. You've got to put that down because it was discussed in the question. Now, having a look at this, when this was asked as a class test, the marks were terrible at UNISA. Mainly because people seem to think that you need to actually solve the problems of the world when you're answering a math paper. So instead of looking back at the question, people suck it out of their thumbs and go, in my judgment. Okay? Your judgment means jack shit when you're actually answering a question. If you want to get marks, go pull stuff out of a exam paper and get the marks out of the exam paper first. If you then want to dazzle the lecturer with your amazing intellect, know that you dazzling the lecturer, but chance of you getting marks for your dazzling intellect are much more remote than if you use something out of the question. It's more likely that if you take something out of the question, it'll be on the mark plan rather than your dazzling intellect. I'm not saying don't do it, but first thing you should do with the time allocation is make sure you pull everything out of the question first, and then if you've got time left over, then dazzle them with your intellect. I hope this helps.